Today's guest, Glen Van Peski, is the founder of Gossamer Gear. Disclaimer, as you already know, Gossamer Gear is a sponsor of Backpacker Radio, but this has played zero part in our interest in having Glen on as a guest. Glen is a pioneer in gear engineering and is very well respected in the backpacking world. We typically avoid having anyone on who's affiliated with one of our sponsors, but Glen's story is too interesting to ignore. So without further ado, welcome to the show, Glen Van Peski.
Well, thanks. Honored to be here.
Yes. Nice to finally make your acquaintance as well. I'm curious. Let's just start at the beginning. I want to know, how did you originally get into backpacking?
Well, originally, so we did camping when I was a kid. My dad had a old International Harvester, and we did car camping. And then my folks got divorced. We moved from Southern California to Western Massachusetts. And my mom joined the Appalachian Mountain Club local chapter, and so we did some hiking there. And then in 1976, I graduated from high school, and I'm not sure why, but rode my bicycle across the country back to California. And so that was, I guess, not quite backpacking, but similar vein. And then got busy going to college, getting married, having kids. And when our oldest son, Brian, joined the local Boy Scout troop, that's when, we started backpacking. I started backpacking with him in Scouts.
And you're still in Massachusetts at this point?
No, we're back out living in San Diego area, Carlsbad,
okay.
California.
Got you. So backpacking, is this on the PCT or just like the local state parks?
We had it was a big, probably still is, a big scout troop that had a very active backpacking program. We did probably 8 or 9 trips a year. The capstone for the older boys was a week-long trek in the Sierra. So could be the PCT, and some of the shorter trips, the shakedowns were also on the PCT, the local portions.
Okay. And I guess that leads us to our next question is, can you give us a run through, and this might be a lengthy list, I imagine, of the backpack, or let's just go with the notable backpacking trips that you've done.
Well, I mean, I've been lucky to backpack a lot, even while I was working. I'm currently retired, but generally got out for, my goal was 24 to kind of 26 days a year. And so I've been lucky to hike at least some on the 3 big trails, Continental Divide, the PCT, done a couple thousand miles of the PCT, done some on the Appalachian Trail, throughout the West, Waymanoosh, Yellowstone, Wind Rivers, and then some overseas in Japan. Got invited to go over there and do a trip. So, it doesn't seem like a lot because there's so much backpacking to do. I mean, it's barely scratched the surface, but I've been lucky to have some variety and enjoy some great trips.
So would you describe your backpacking, like what's the typical length outing that you go for?
Typical, and this was especially true when I was working, but it's still generally the case. Kind of 3 to 4 days. That's
okay.
Kind of my typical trip. I've been as long as 2 weeks, but typically, 3 or 4 days is kind of the typical trip I go on.
And what began the foray into designing your own gear?
Well, my mom always thought that every kid should leave home knowing how to cook, bake, and sew. And so all 3 of us kids can do those things. So when I was when Brian, our oldest son, joined the local Boy Scout troop in Oceanside, the scoutmaster who I knew from Toastmasters, Reed Miller, read Ray Jardine's original book, the PCT Hiker's Handbook. And so Reed started talking about, going lighter, but he didn't know how to sew. So, I ended up reading the book and figuring out that looking at all my gear, the gear at that point that I had, I didn't have any left over from my childhood. So I went into local REI before the first Boy Scout Sierra trek and said, we're going for a week in the Sierras. What do we need? And they loaded us up, with this was internal packs had just come out. That was the slick new thing. And, big like 0 degree bag and MSR liquid fuel stove and, the whole 9 yards, big tents. So after reading Jardine's book, I could see my 7.5 pound empty internal frame pack was like a good place to start. That was like the biggest, heaviest thing I had. So I started sewing packs.
At this point, did the light bulb go off that there was a market opportunity for this, or were you thinking just specifically for yourself?
No, I was just sewing gear for myself. I mean, I, started with one pack that was actually huge, very ugly, and relatively heavy, probably weighed 2.5 pounds, but that was a big improvement over my 7.5 pound internal frame pack. So no, I really had no ideas to turn this into a business. I was just sewing gear for myself, and each time I'd sew a pack, we'd take it out and I'd think about, well, this works, this doesn't work, and how to make it better. And so I ended up, the fourth pack that I sewed, we kind of referred to it as the G4 just because my name starts with G. Didn't put a lot of thought into it. And these were this was the early internet days, and there were listservs out there. And so I, had some interest in it. So I drew up a plan and a set of instructions and put it on the internet so people could make their own. Not interested in trying to sell anything or anything like that. And I would get calls from people saying, hey, I don't know how to sew, and I don't know anyone that knows how to sew. Can you make one for me? And at this point, it took me about 10 hours to put together a pack from scratch, cut it out and sew it. And I was working, 70, 80 hours a week doing the engineering. So I said, no, no, I'm not going to sew you a pack. But after a couple of inquiries, I felt bad. And I thought, well, I should figure out if I could get a few of these made for people who don't happen to know how to sew. So I contacted the people at Quest Outfitters, which is where I was ordering the fabric from, and explained the problem to them. I need someone to sew a few of these packs for people that are calling. And she said, well, I don't know. There's, in its trade publication, there's this place in Seattle that advertises for doing cut and sew. So I contacted them, mailed them up a pack, and he says, yeah, our minimum order is 100. I go, oh, yeah, I think I need about 25. And then everyone will have one, and I can go back to doing the engineering. And so we went back and forth and finally settled on 50, which I thought, okay, well, they'll be in the garage for about 5 or 10 years, but I'll eventually get rid of them. So, I had 50 packs and put together a little order form on the internet. And before he was even done with those packs, the first 50, I had like 86 orders.
Wow. How quickly?
So, what's that?
Was that instantaneous you sold through the supply?
Yeah, I had like 86. I think I put the form up before he'd actually shipped the packs. So I had 86 orders before I actually had receipt of the 50 packs.
Yeah. Does that make you nervous, not knowing that the quality that they're going to be able to turn back to you?
We'd gone back and forth a couple times, so I was pretty sure it would be close. I mean, the early ones were pretty crude, pretty simple. I mean, it was stuff I could sew, and I'm no sewing genius. So, it made me a little nervous because I didn't really know what I was getting into, and I didn't really need another job. So, I was just trying to get a few packs into the hands of people that wanted them.
So what was your full-time job at that point?
Consulting engineering. I'm a civil engineer by training.
So a pretty direct transition from your former career to this.
Well, and I guess I don't really count this career. I've never taken any money from Gossamer Gear, salary or anything. Um, I get, I did get paid well as an engineer, and so I didn't need the money. I was just trying to, make packs for people so they could get out more and
Yeah.
carry less weight.
Yeah. Definitely have more questions about the business side of things, but I want to learn more about this origin story. So, do you remember what the run of 50 packs cost you back then?
I'm trying to remember. We charged $70, and that included postage. We shipped them out priority mail.
That's a
Um,
steal.
and I think I was paying maybe 30, $40 a piece, something like that.
And then kind of walk me through the evolution of scaling it from, the initial order of 50 packs to like what was the next step after that?
It was, well, the initially we had, I offered one size a pack, which was my size because that's what I had the pattern for. So there's probably a lot of people out there with packs that were too big for them. In four different colors. And I have no idea why I thought like a choice of color was more important than one that would fit you. I have no idea
Yeah.
why I thought that was important. But eventually we added like a medium and a small and kind of honed in on the green, kind of forest green color. Started selling Z-Rest pads to go in the back that formed the frame for them. And I would just go down to REI and buy them and then cut them up and put them in the packs. Yeah, I got the kind of trained my wife to do the shipping for a while. And then had a brief time when I thought that adding products kind of generate more sales, I guess, would generate enough cash so I could pay someone else to do all the shipping. And at the time, Ryan Jordan from Backpacking Light was pioneering a program where, for small startups, he would handle all the fulfillment. And so he was doing that for a while. And then my wife, Francie, saw some of the checks I was writing to him. And she says, well, what the heck? I'll do it for that. So I drove a van to Bozeman and picked everything up and drove it back. And she started doing the shipping again.
So he was in Bozeman at the time because he's in Wyoming now, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And about to move again, but yeah. And I had initially it was just some form. My sister Brooke did a little website at some point. Our son Brian redid that at some point. So it was really kind of, I didn't put a lot of time into it because I didn't have a lot of time. So it wasn't some master plan. It was just trying to, okay, how do we get the next shipment made and get the quality okay and get them shipped.
Yeah. So at this point, it sounds like you're pretty much removed from the process. Like you're just doing the actual designing of the gear and then you're outsourcing the manufacturing to Seattle and your wife is handling the fulfillment. So what, aside from, I would assume you're designing new gear at some point, but like what is your day-to-day involvement with Gossamer Gear at this point? And is it Gossamer Gear out of the gate, like, or is it Glen Van Peski's
No,
packs?
it was GVP gear. I still have some old GVP gear labels, because I never figured it would amount to anything. So I didn't think of like a cool name. I was like, well, I'll just use my initials and put gear on the end and, roll on down the road. In the very early stages, we actually had my wife and a couple of gals on the street sewing packs, but it quickly became apparent that wasn't gonna work. That wasn't scalable. So yeah, I was doing all the customer service and answering all the emails and taking all the orders, mailing all the deposits. People were mailing checks. We still didn't have a way to take credit cards or anything like that.
What year is this?
Oh, this is, I should have printed something out. This is, let's see, like 98, 99, kind of early 2000s.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting because in Malcolm Gladwell's book Outliers, like he attributes a lot of people's success to timing in life, and it sounds like you're just getting off the ground kind of in the beginning days of the internet. Like I know obviously the internet predates 98, but like it's not a mainstream thing. And I know that obviously your initial sales come through the listserv. But I imagine at the point where it becomes easy to build a website and handle payment processing, you're kind of already hitting your stride with what you're doing with GVP gear.
Yeah, no, that's definitely timing. You know, and I think being early in on the whole movement to lightweight backpacking. You know, I mean, now I don't really keep up, but I mean, there's like thousands or hundreds at least of little startups that are making amazing, cool gear, and you know, they can throw together a professional website and take orders and stuff in a way that, you know, we just couldn't. I was like, people were mailing checks. I still have the yellow pad of paper that I would write down the orders on, you know, the name and what date, and then a little check mark when the check came in and when we shipped it. And, you know, that was our process. We didn't have the benefit of the technology, but we had the benefit of being one of the first kind of people in, you know, I mean, in the first couple of years, it seems like it was us and Henry Shire's, you know, tarp tent, 6 Moon Designs, and that was kind of it. I mean, so I think that helped. I mean, first one in is, you know, it's worth a lot, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. So you also mentioned that pack that you were making back then was the G4. Is this the same design as the G420 that's being sold today?
No, the G420 is based on it, but you know, significantly updated. I still have a brand new one of the old G4s, you know, pretty goofy looking. People that have them though, is like, good luck trying to get a hold of them because they love them. I mean, some of the people that have those old ones, they hold on to them. And the early pack designs really kind of mimicked my transition as my load got lighter. You know, like the G5 was, I didn't need as much stuff anymore. So I could, you know, we had new materials. And so we offered new models as I continually got my own load lighter and sewed lighter packs to carry.
And you also mentioned Henry Shire back in the day. And was it 6 Moon Designs was the other company that you?
Yeah, Ron Moak, 6 Moon Designs. Yeah.
How collaborative are these cottage gear companies with one another? Like, is it a pretty friendly environment, or are you guys trying to hide trade secrets from each other? How does that work?
It's a delicate combination. I mean, in general, it's pretty collaborative, and especially the early days, everyone was just trying to figure out, you know, how to get stuff made and what worked and what didn't. You know, I know some of the early days, like we would figure out, you know, how to get some lighter webbing or something that people were after. And, you know, somebody would call and want our source, and I would talk to, you know, this is after Grant Seibel was running, and he goes, hey, you know, I want to be cooperative, but, you know, this is an edge. We took us a lot of time to find this. And I go, yeah, go ahead and share, because, you know, we're going to want to figure something out that they already know the answer to. So, you know, it all works out. So I would say it was a really collaborative environment. You know, we did actually, and Brian Frankel, ULA, was kind of the other early guy. And the four of us would do a brain trust hike. It wasn't every year, but there were a few of them where the four of us founders would go out on a trip together. And, you know, there was some trash talking. I think Ron Moak did most of it, but, you know, it was good fun. And it was great to see the looks on some faces of like thru hikers or something who knew like the companies. Wait, you guys are like all competitors, but you're out on a hike together. It's like, yeah, we're friends too. You know, it's
Yeah, that is I think a really admirable quality that I've noticed in the industry is everyone is very friendly with one another. Or I should say most people are very friendly. That's not necessarily universal, but much more so than you'd think for competitors. I'm curious, can you speak to, I guess I want to know more about the evolution from GVP gear to Gossamer gear.
So the, we tried a lot of things, and I didn't keep track of any sales numbers or anything like that. I mean, I just used money came in. I think I had a separate checking account, but just used it to buy materials. I didn't take any money out of it. But then what I guess the kind of the key turning point was I got to the point where I was working 60, 70 hours a week doing the engineering and 30 hours a week doing Gossamer Gear, customer service, shipping stuff out, getting stuff made. And it, I had 3 kids, it just wasn't sustainable. And since I was getting paid well for one and not paid at all for the other, it was pretty obvious like which I needed to choose. So about this time, I was on the board of directors for the Pacific Crest Trail Association, and as was Henry Shires. And in a board meeting, we were talking about possible people to join the board or make large donations. And Henry Shires had noticed that John Mackey, the co-founder of Whole Foods Market, was a customer of his, and thought he'd be a good guy to hit up. And so I checked my yellow line pad, and I noticed John Mackey had ordered a bunch of stuff from me. I just, I didn't shop at Whole Foods, so I didn't recognize it. And so we, the executive director of the PCTA, we came up with a plan to make a pitch to John Mackey. And by this time, I had a somewhat of a small reputation in the ultralight community. And so Mackey said, well, I'd be interested in, meeting Glenn. I'm going to be in Boulder in August or whenever it was. And, I'll sit down with dinner with you guys. So the executive director and I flew to Boulder and met with John Mackey and, made the pitch of like, well, I should join the board and make a donation, which are pretty much the same thing. But he, so a couple weeks after I went back home, a couple weeks after the executive director called me, Liz Bergeron, and said, hey, it's time for you to follow up with John. And since you're the connection there. So by this time, kind of in the intervening weeks, I'd figured out, I got to close down the gear company. I can't do both. And I got to do the one that is going to pay the mortgage and put the kids through college. So I called John Mackey to follow up, and he declined to join the board. He did make what at the time was the largest single donation in the PCTA history. But he, he guards his time very jealously. So he has time for what's important to him. And so I said, oh, by the way, I'm going to be closing down the company. So if there's anything you want to order, you want to do it in the next couple of weeks, because I'm just going to sell everything off and close the doors. And so John said, well, I'm leaving on a hike, but don't do anything until I get back and give you a call. So he called me a day or two later and said, I got a proposal for you. He said, I think you make good products and the company needs to stay in existence. And I will pay you $100,000 for 75%. And you can be as involved or uninvolved as you want. And I will hire someone, put more money in to run it. And what do you think? So I sounded like a good deal to me. I could still be as involved as I chose to, but the day-to-day stuff, would be run by someone else. I had kind of had my doubts that it would generate enough cash that you could actually pay someone. But um,
That's a dream situation to get paid that much money for something that you're going to close down anyways, to
yeah,
own a quarter of the company and have someone with the business credibility of the founder of Whole Foods to take it over. Like, how do you say no to that?
yeah, I didn't see a downside.
Yeah.
And John wasn't going to run it. I mean, he was a busy guy. I mean, I'm sure he would have been highly successful, but it wasn't his, key purpose in life to run a gear company. He just thought it should stay around for a while longer. So he hired Grant Seibel, who had hiked when he was through hiking the Appalachian Trail. We shipped everything to Grant, drove up from Texas and put everything in a van again and took it to Texas.
Wow. That's incredible. That I knew that John Mackey was involved. I didn't know the intricacies of that story. That's a great story. So what is your involvement today? Because you mentioned that for a quarter of the company, you could be as involved or uninvolved as you want. How does that translate for you?
It's varied over the years. And now that I'm retired, I could be more involved, but I have a million more things I want to do than time to do them. So, I check in with Grant regularly. I chair board meetings, but mostly I tinker with things that I want to do. I've got a 1,000-mile bike packing trip coming up. So, I wanted a new tent. So, I designed and built a 6-ounce tent because it's going to be buggy on the trip. So I thought, well, I want, something bigger than a tarp. We're working on a cooking system, tent stakes.
Is this the Crotch Pot? I know that's a
No.
GVP original, right?
No. Yeah, no, the Crotch Pot came out of one of those brain trust hikes with, Henry Shires, Ron Moak, and Brian Frankel. And we were hiking along, we're doing the Tahoe Rim Trail, and discussion goes to, as always, like, how can you save weight? And it was like, well, body heat, parts of your body are hot. You could probably like soak something and get it warm. And so I decided, well, no time like the present to let's execute this and, see if it's got legs, so to speak. So I had a Ziploc bag, and I forget what the meal was, some kind of freeze-dried meal or something, dehydrated. So I poured some water in and slipped it in my pants and flipped the top of the Ziploc over to kind of hold it. And walking along, and I thought, well, I better check it. And it must not have been a freezer Ziploc. I don't know what the problem was, but as I pulled the thing out, the top ripped off. So I was able to extract it, but came very close to wearing my dinner the very first night there. But from that, I thought, hey, this has potential, and so we created the product that we now sell.
The Crotch Pot, yeah, that was a very popular review that we did. I want to say a year and a half or so ago. I think shortly after you guys released it, but yeah, that one grabs a lot of attention, and it's a good name as well.
It's a good seller, It's like it sells constantly.
Yeah. Another thing I want to talk about is you have a very unique hike through the High Sierra, and I'm guessing you know what I'm alluding to here. Can you share that story in terms of your gear choice?
Oh, yeah. So I was at Outdoor Retailer a few years ago, and I forget. I always like to cruise through there's not a lot that's of interest because most everything is heavier than what I have in my kit. But I was going through the Mountainsmith booth, and I've always thought it'd be cool to take a hike with just a lumbar pack, And so I was talking to Jonathan McFarland, who's now the general manager. I forget what his title is, but he's running the place. And he says, well, that sounds like a cool idea. He says, I'd send you one. So I ended up inviting him on the hike actually. And was the pack was heavier than what I usually carry, because at that point I'm, carrying a murmur, some kind of murmur like that weighs 8 ounces. And this thing was, I don't know, I have to look at the gear list, but it had been a pound and a half. But I didn't care. It wasn't about the weight. And it was just interesting you're solving for volume then. That's the constraining factor, not the weight. So I managed to do it. We did like a, I don't know, 3-day hike in the Sierras.
What time of year was this?
This was fall.
Okay. So you need some pretty substantial gear, like the High Sierra in the fall. You're going to get below freezing every night, I imagine.
Yeah. Yeah. It was cold. But I had my tarp. I had the sleeping bag. I had to stuff really tighter than I would usually stuff a sleeping bag. Wasn't not good for down. But hiking out, it was great seeing people going in, with huge packs, teetering, and they figured we were day hiking. I go, no, we're coming out. We've been out for 3 days, and they're like, what?
Yeah. Having a drone drop your gear from spot to spot.
Yeah. So but it actually came in handy, because I actually had my wife, Francie, and a friend of hers on that trip. And we did our route includes some cross country going up Puppet Pass, which is, you're kind of clambering over kind of refrigerator sized rocks at a pretty good pitch. So they were not happy about that. And I ended up carrying both Francie's pack and my pack and her girlfriend's pack, going up with 3 packs. I strapped my lumbar pack onto the back of hers, put hers on my back, and Christy's on my front, and was still able to hike it up. But, that's the advantage of going lightweight, is you can carry 3 packs if you need to.
Was the weight sitting lower? Did you have sore muscles in different places than you? Because obviously, like, if you shift the way the weight's distributed, I imagine your body's going to compensate one way or the other. Or was it that you were so light that you just felt fresh by the end of it?
It wasn't that much weight, so yeah, it really doesn't much matter.
And do you recall any specific gear compromises that you made to allow that volume to work for you? Like items you didn't bring, or things you swapped out that were maybe sketchy for a normal backpacking trip?
I stuffed my sleeping bag tighter than I normally would. And I think I had to use the Crotch Pot on that one, because the volume for my Foster's can was just tough to fit that in. Everything else seemed like it pretty much worked. I mean, I usually have capacity for more water. But Sierras in the fall, you got plentiful water, so 1 or 2 small bottles was fine. But those are the main compromises. I think I had to go Crotch Pot because I didn't have the volume for my Foster's can.
Yeah. So I want to take a step back and zoom out a little bit. I'm curious to know your personal gear philosophy overall, because it sounds like in the beginning you were very much in the UL worlds and, trying to bring that to the mass market. But I think one thing that Gossamer Gear does well today is they kind of are in that middle ground. Like, they do have some good UL options, but there are also many options that are kind of in that middle ground between like hardcore UL and, the 4-pound packs that you're going to find at REI. So I'm curious to know where your personal philosophy kind of lies in this spectrum.
My general gear list, if I'm not really trying to go light, I mean, just a regular trip, is under 5 pounds base pack weight.
Wow.
So if I'm trying hard, I've done under 3. For specific.
How? I need to know how.
I can send you the list. It was like 2.7. It was for a real trip that I did.
Yeah. So just walk us through at least some of the bigger items, your big 3.
Big 3 was, light sleeping bag, and I actually wanted to go sub 2 with no sleeping bag, walk at night, because that's when it's the coldest, and then sleep during the day when it's warm enough you don't need a sleeping bag.
Yeah, the
Um,
nocturnal plan.
yeah, but a buddy dropped out at the last minute, so I thought, well, if I'm going by myself, I probably should back it down a little bit. So I took a sleeping bag. So it's just a sleeping bag, um, uh, tarp. I mean, I got a basically a 17-ounce sleeping bag. Um,
Do you make
I
it
might have.
yourself?
No, it was made for me though.
Hmm.
It's a custom bag. And
From a particular
then
company?
Nunatak.
Okay.
Um, and then I think I had a kind of a 3.5 ounce pack that was pretty minimal. Um, but I sewed something extra because this was on the PCT, kind of a desert section. And so I needed to carry more water. And I figured the pack wouldn't support it. So I actually sewed something so I could carry like a 3-liter platy on my waist. So I didn't need the pack for that. So that was part of my strategy for that. And then, Cuban fiber wedge, DCF wedge, minimal tarp.
Yeah. And from what I've observed, it seems like there's maybe 2 or 3 different reasons behind why people go extremely UL, and I would say 2 to 3 pounds is very much in that description. One is to reduce the impact, obviously prevent injuries, or if you're dealing with any sort of injuries, it alleviates that. Some people use it to go further, to be able to cover more miles over a given stretch, and then some people just like the challenge of it. Like they nerd out over looking at their spreadsheet and seeing how low they can get that number, and then just like that for a big subsect of people, I've noticed like that is the draw for them. How would you describe your interest in UL?
It's probably all 3. I mean, I do. I have a spreadsheet for every trip I've ever taken, and I do admit, like, if it creeps up like over 5 pounds, like, okay, I got to cut something here. I mean, there is that element definitely. I think mostly for me, it's being able to do longer. I mean, I like to get up and walk all day. We generally plan trips for 20 to 30 miles a day. And so that favors a lighter load if you're going to be walking all day. If you're going to be sitting somewhere and lounging in camp, that probably favors a little more comfort. But, if you're walking 30 miles a day, I would argue that the greatest comfort is a light pack. And so that really drives my choices. And I just like the challenge. To me, it's, I backpack to get out into the wilderness. And so the less gear I have, I feel like that's the less between me and that wilderness experience, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I mean, you want enough, obviously, that you don't freeze. And, I've definitely had trips where I've strayed into what Andrew Skirka likes to call stupid light, where I made some bad choices and paid the consequences. But, in general, I mean, I'm much happier under a tarp because you can see and hear what's going on and it just feels like you're closer to nature, if that makes sense.
And how much Gossamer Gear are you actually using? Is it all Gossamer Gear stuff?
It's a lot of Gossamer Gear stuff, although it's, it's a lot of stuff we don't sell. Like
your
the
prototypes?
wedge. Yeah, my prototypes. It's, some of it's stuff we're currently working on, but I mean, we've been kicking around getting the wedge made for I don't know how many years. We're getting closer, but.
So the wedge is this tarp?
Yeah, it's like a 2.7 ounce tarp.
Did you were you involved in the design of the one? Because I know that's obviously been a huge seller.
Yeah.
Can you walk us through sort of the main philosophy behind that? And then I'm also curious to learn about the transition, or I guess the addition of the DCF version of it.
So the one started with a customer, Rick Christensen in lives in Santa Barbara. He's a great tinkerer, gear tinkerer, and he had some of our gear and actually connected up with another guy there that he recognized where they passed on the trail, and they both saw each other's packs and go, "Hey, wait, you know Gossamer Gear?" This was early days. And yeah, he came up with the design. He used to use screws and set them up on his wooden deck. And so, we took that and tweaked it some and came up with the one.
And what challenges did you run into specifically with the DCF version of it? Because I know there have been some pretty notable, I'd say, unsuccessful might be too strong, but maybe less than ideal applications of DCF in the backpacking world. Not to point fingers, but I have had issues with the Big Agnes DCF for a few reasons. So I imagine it's not as simple as just like swapping out the fabric and like, voila, you've got a new tent. Like there's got to be other considerations involved.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm, by no means an expert, but things I've noticed with the DCF is one is it's strong for force applied uniformly. But obviously shelter has the force is concentrated at points. And so you've got to transition that adequately to take advantage of the materials. Also the DCF doesn't stretch. So, I mean, you can make a nylon thing that if you crank the pressure in, sets up really nice, because the nylon stretches, and it's a little trickier with the DCF. You can't build in a design that takes advantage of that stretch. Mm-hmm. So the geometry is a little different. Those are the main things. I mean, and, obviously it's great. In terms of waterproof and strength applied uniformly, but not great at abrasion. I set up one night on the PCT, and it was I don't remember the name of the place. It's in Southern California, and it's kind of in a sandy gap, and the wind was just blowing like crazy, and so I had to take a rock to steady one of the rear guy lines on my tarp, but all night the thing was flapping on the rock, which just ate. I mean, I had to toss the thing after that. Basically, it just ate a hole right in the tarp. So, not great for abrasion.
Yeah, and I guess I should zoom out a little bit. I think I sometimes take for granted some of the things in the backpacking world and the gear world. Can you define what DCF is, and then kind of outline some of the feature benefits and maybe drawbacks? You already touched on a couple of them, of the fabric overall.
Well, there's probably more expert people than me to opine on this, but so DCF is basically a non-permeable membrane. I think it's some kind of mylar or something like that, with some of the heavier ones have fabric bonded to them, but in its lighter forms has basically fibers or filaments bonded to that that give it the strength. And it's Dyneema, similar, some stuff that's used in bulletproof vests. So it's extremely strong material, but so they bond threads of this to this mylar membrane. And I mean, the main advantage is it's super light. I mean, I built a 6-ounce tent using the DCF that weighs 0.3 of an ounce per square yard. It's just crazy light. I know a lot of people use it. I mean, I see it used in packs, and frankly, again, I'm not the expert, but I don't see. It doesn't seem like a great application to me, because it's. By the time you make it heavy enough to handle the abrasion, it's like you might as well just use Oxford. I mean, it's a fraction of the cost. And generally your pack doesn't need to be like, you're not going to be shooting bullets at it. It doesn't need to be that strong, but that's just me. I mean, people sell a lot of packs made out of it. I just don't get it.
You said Oxford. I'm not familiar with this.
Oh, Oxford fabric, just, regular nylon, heavier nylon stuff, like, 4 ounces per square yard, stuff like that.
So DCF is, would you say it's worth the rage? People go crazy for it. Like, it seems like every brand has unveiled a DCF version of their tent and they can't keep it in stock. And I know that there's supply issues with it. Is it properly hyped? Is it overhyped? I'm curious to just get your thoughts on DCF overall.
Well, I mean, if you really want to get super light, it's hard to beat for the weight. You can get nylon to 1 ounce per square yard, roughly. But below that, you really need to go to DCF. And so, to me, shelters is what it makes sense for, because you've got a large amount of surface area. And so your weight savings will add up. In a pack, there's not that much fabric. So, if your fabric's a little lighter, it's not going to translate that much to a lighter pack. But a shelter, if you've got, 6 or 7 yards of material in it, it's like, that's going to be significant.
Mm-hmm. Do you see any fabrics in the pipeline that are not well known by the general market right now that could potentially disrupt the way that DCF has, or are we still a ways off from something like that?
I don't know. I mean, it's hard to see. Of course, I mean, when I started selling packs, I was using 2.2 ounce nylon ripstop, and that was light stuff. We were actually the first ones to use sailcloth to try and, get lighter fabrics. First ones to use sailcloth in the outdoor industry. So, and we've been lucky. We've worked with manufacturers to make our own fabrics, to get the weight to strength that we want to, for our products. But in terms of something that's going to be, replace DCF, I mean, I personally think at the current prices, someone's going to come up with something, because it just doesn't, I don't know, it just doesn't seem like it can go on. I mean, the price for the tents and for saving a couple ounces, I mean, if money no object, well, that's always great. But at some point, it just seems like it's people have got to come up with something else.
Yeah, I guess that's my issue with it. I'm not issues overstating it, but I think sort of the discrepancy between the rage and the actual practical value of it, because a lot of people that are shelling out $600 or $700 for a tent are the ones who are, digging out dumpsters halfway through their through hike. And if that's a compromise you want to make, so be it. It just seems like for the amount of weight savings that you're getting, it's a pretty steep price penalty to pay. Also, I should mention, Chance just got here, so apologies if this is kind of an awkward interjection here, but
don't let me interrupt.
Yeah. There was a little bit of a scheduling conflict, so Chance just got off her 9 to 5. Good to have you here, Chance.
Thanks.
Let's see. I've got kind of all over the map in terms of where we are with the questioning. Here's an interesting one. I don't think we've actually talked about this on the show, and I would be curious to get your take on this. What is in your go-to first aid backpacking kit?
Oh, well, I could, I could send you the spreadsheet, obviously, because I have a spreadsheet for it. It's not much, and it's usually used for someone else. Typically, it has a much bigger, heavier first aid kit, but they don't have the one thing that they need. So mine's pretty curated for the stuff that I've seen go wrong on trips. A little anti-diarrheal is always useful. Some basic pain reliefs, Tylenol PM, when you sleep on a 2.3 ounce foam pad, that's always useful. I'd have to go through the list. Some basic wound care, butterfly bandages for gashes, things like that.
Mm-hmm. Sorry, I'm just trying to help Chauncey here with the questions that we haven't gone through. A little bit of awkward timing. I apologize for that.
That's okay. Fix it in post.
Yeah. We probably won't. We're raw. This is us. Chauncey's drinking. Yeah, Kim Crawford wine. I'm opening a Coors Light right now.
Honestly,
there you go.
It's Matua, but it's not bad either.
Yeah.
Okay, so a little birdie told us that you're obsessed with being of service for others, and that first aid kit example you gave of having things that other people might not kind of echoes that. Do you know what the reason for that is, or can you give like a recent example?
Being of service?
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm a Christian, so I believe, I was put here not so that I can have a good life, but to figure out how to use my particular talents or connections or anything like that to help others. And, I have to say it's worked out. I do like to be of service as long as it doesn't result in me carrying extra weight. So, there is some caveats. It's like, yeah, I'll give you a Band-Aid, but I'm not going to carry a AED for you or something like that.
Yeah. And I wasn't given much context that from the little birdie, but the way I interpreted it was more of a general philosophy, not just necessarily backpacking per se. Is this something that translates to your life overall?
Yeah. I enjoy. I think I was put here to help other people, and I don't have a huge number of talents, but if I can use one of them to help someone, when I meet someone, I'm always interested in, or as interested in an introvert could be, as to what they're doing and what they're working on and what excites them and what problems they're trying to solve, because I might know someone that could help them. It's unlikely I'm going to be able to help them. But I occasionally, one of my retirement gigs is washing dishes. I used to celebrate Mondays after retirement by taking my Wall Street Journal and going to the local bakery and just sitting there and blowing an hour reading my paper, something I never had a chance to do when I was working not really 9 to 5, more like 5 to 9, but and I saw a notice on the door as I was leaving, said, "Hey, attention high schoolers, we're looking for a part-time dishwasher." And I didn't think anything of it because, I'm not a high schooler and I wasn't looking for a job. But, I noticed week after week, after month, it was still there. So I asked them, I go, "Hey, shouldn't you take that sign down?" And they go, No, we're still looking for someone. And I thought, maybe this has my name on it.
Speaking of which, anyway, I think that's the top thing that's listed on your LinkedIn profile.
Yeah. Well, it's my most recent job. So
yeah, well done. Actually, so you mentioned bakery, and I remember way early on in the interview you mentioned that your mom taught you 3 things: how to sew, how to cook, and how to bake. I'm curious if you've got a go-to baked good that you specialize in.
Well, I bake all the bread we eat. I baked this morning. We just got back last night, so we needed bread. So I baked.
Do you have a go-to bread?
I use a sourdough recipe, and I've bounced around kind of 3 or 4 of them. The current one is loosely kind of the tartine country bread recipe.
So just to jump to a completely different topic than bread, what are some of your favorite non-Gossamer Gear choices?
Yeah, we have to emphasize that this is not an ad for Gossamer Gear, so let's pump up the competition a little bit here.
Yeah. I do have some Z-Pack stuff in my pack. I think they do a good job. I also apply the philosophy, kind of my take less, do more, to what I call front country travel. We did a trip a couple of years ago in Europe, and on the same trip, we were on a luxury cruise. We were hiking in the Dolomites, driving around Europe, kayaking, biking, and going to the opera because we have a friend who sings opera in Munich. So, we needed a wide variety of clothes. But I did all that in one carry-on. So part of my passion is, trying to use the same philosophy and look for kind of gear hacks for other travel, regular travel on planes and stuff that you're not actually walking. And so I think, like Bluffworks makes some cool stuff, Y Athletics, Ministry of Supply makes some cool products.
I'm actually not familiar with those brands. I should be taking notes right now. At least we need you on this one.
I do have another question that popped up, and now I can't get it out of my head. A couple years back, I spoke to someone from Gossamer Gear, and they were telling me how there is an audience that will buy the one tent as a two-person shelter. And I was wondering if you can speak any truth to that, or if I was just being consoled.
So let's give a little background on this.
Okay. I'll give you the background after.
Sure.
Just tell me if that's
Well,
true or not.
I had not heard that, but I'm not involved in customer service, so I'm not the expert on what people are using our products for. At 6'4", I would not be sharing the one with anyone. Although, I actually was on a trip. The two of us were in a shelter, the early spin shelter that was a lot smaller than the one. So I take that back. But that was a isolated instance. It was one night. So I was not aware of that, but if they told you that, then I'm going to say that was true.
I'll believe you, I guess, but they were definitely just making me feel better.
Your 2/3 pound base weight is even more impressive now that I know that you're 6'4", because Trance keeps a very light pack. She's probably about a foot shorter than you.
I'm 5'1", so
Okay.
everything adds up.
Yeah.
Fast.
To get to 3 pounds is someone that's 6'4", so you're buying extra large apparel, everything, right?
Extra long, yeah.
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 That's very impressive. And not to be too observant of what you're wearing, but you mentioned apparel that's functional for travel and everything like that. Is that an R1 hoodie that I'm seeing under the vest?
That's R1 hoodie, which I don't usually take traveling. I have the Patagonia, what is it? The Puff Air, I think, vest that's nice and smooth, so it looks a little dressy. So you can actually wear that with a blazer, and a collar shirt. But for travel, I'm looking for stuff that you can wash in a sink, wear multiple days without washing. It has some kind of anti-stink stuff. Doesn't need to be dry clean. You can wash and hang it up, and but is a functional fabric, so you can hike in it, but also is cut in a way that you can wear it to the opera.
Yeah.
Throw a blazer on. And
I wish more apparel brands would focus on the anti-funk aspect of it, because obviously everything merino is going to do a good job with that, but there's a handful of products that Patagonia has that has the anti-funk application. I want to say Ex Officio was in that game for a while, but it seems like they've kind of backed off. In terms of backpackers, that's one of the most important traits. If you're wearing something for 8 straight days between laundry sessions, just even delaying the onset of smelling like a sewer for 48 hours is greatly appreciated.
Yeah. No, Y Athletics makes some cool stuff that has, they do some kind of silver wash that makes it antimicrobial. I like their stuff.
So it's in the wash. It's in the detergent, or is it actually an application to the fabric?
No, it's in the fabric.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
And I'm curious, I know obviously a lot of what you backpack is, you mentioned relics. What is the oldest piece of gear that you hike with today or backpack with?
The oldest piece of gear in my pack, which is still from that day when I walked down with Brian when he was probably 15, and he's now in his 30s, went down to REI to gear up for the Scout Trek in the Sierras, Weekend Sierras. And I have a pair of purple, I don't know why purple, fleece socks that I use as my sleeping socks. And so that's the oldest piece of gear. I've been using that continuously for 20 years.
They haven't gotten holes or anything?
No, because I only use them for sleeping.
Mm.
Although I have been thinking, it's actually on my list to cut a thumb hole in them so I could also use them as mittens.
And then if your big toe gets cold, you've got a solution.
Yeah, you can stick it out, right? Or pull it in, I guess, yeah.
You also mentioned this 6-ounce tent that you're currently prototyping. Is this something we're going to see in the Gossamer Gear store in the near future?
Yeah, we're working on it.
Any tips to what the name on this might be?
Working title is The Whisper.
Whisper. I like that.
Which, old timers will go, wait, didn't you have a pack named The Whisper once? But we haven't had that in a long time, so
yeah,
that would bring the name back on a different product.
We also talked a little bit about what the evolution of innovative fabrics might be, but I'm curious to get your take on if there's going to be a next wave of innovations that are not necessarily fabric related, because like just in the decade that I've been paying attention to backpacking, it's gone from like heavy duty internal frame packs to like something like the Mariposa with like a simple stay to the frameless packs. And maybe this is just my personal evolution to more ultralight gear, but I've also noticed this, I think, more mainstream and through hiking as well. I'm curious if you see anything in the forefront in the next 2, 3, 4 years that doesn't exist with maybe the mainstream through hiker that will exist in, 2025 or something.
Yeah, I don't know. When you get to, changes in materials will take you so far, but at some point to get even lighter, it involves, and I'm sure you found this, picking up skills, being comfortable with knowing how to set up a tarp so it provides you good protection so you don't need to carry tent. If you learn how to sleep comfortably on a thin foam pad by contouring the ground so it matches your body, and always, of course, restoring it afterwards. So I think, if you learn to eat with chopsticks, then you can use your tent stakes to eat and hold your tent down.
Is that something you do?
Yeah.
Yeah, that is aggressive.
Actually, or are you just saying yeah?
So I was in Japan being interviewed a couple of years ago, and there's actually a guy in Japan who owns more of my packs than I do. He has a collection of literally like every single pack, GVP gear, Gossamer gear ever made. But so in the course of the interview, we talked about my bicycle trip across the country in 1976. And I had determined, because by then, at that point, like they were selling big steel, like knife, fork, and spoon for eating. There wasn't all the light stuff you can get now. So I was like, well, bamboo chopsticks are like way lighter than anything else. So I ate that whole summer on chopsticks. And I guess it came up because whenever I'm in Japan, they go, oh, you eat pretty good with chopsticks. And I explain that's because I was with 3 other guys on a bike trip, and we would buy a half gallon of ice cream and then just sit down in a circle and pass it around. And so when everyone else has a spoon and you've got chopsticks, and you're fighting for your share of the ice cream, you get pretty good at chopsticks. But I would use those bamboo chopsticks at night to stake out my tarp that I had made over my hammock. So I was telling the story to the guy, and I suddenly thought, why don't we have that product? And so we're actually working on bringing that. We call it the chop steak. And we've got a couple prototypes. I took some on my last trip, but we're still working on finalizing that.
Some good probiotics in the soil. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So I feel like we're missing some other UL gems here. Do you have any other gear redundancies as ridiculous as that?
That's probably the big one.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah. I use hospital booties as camp shoes. I don't know. I don't think of.
Is the hospital booty durable enough? I feel like I would rip a hole through it instantly.
They work better on some things than others. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like the camp shoe is one area that could use some innovation in the world, because like I love Crocs too heavy, and I love having a camp shoe also, like something to walk around at camp, but I'm oftentimes too stingy with my pack weight to even consider it.
So am I literally spread out my Z-Lite, and that's my area. It's like putting like a little child's pen around me. If it's not on that mat,
yeah,
I'm like reaching for it like super far.
Yeah, like playing hot lava as a kid.
Lava,
yeah, exactly.
Well, you need to check out Mayfly Ultralight.
Okay.
Mayfly Ultralight, because this guy has come up with an ultralight camp shoe. It's a sandal. Mayfly Ultralight.
Interesting. This looks very bare bones. I got a bungee cord.
Super light.
Yeah, that's clever. Glenn, well, I know that we're up against your upper limit. You've got a dinner to get to. Thanks for being flexible with this. I'm curious, do you have any parting words for the backpackers of the world?
Get out there. I mean, to me, that's the goal. I mean, it's fun doing the spreadsheets, but the goal is to get outside, make it easier to get outside. My gear is always, when I come back from a trip, I always replenish stuff I used and repack it so I can go. I'm ready to go out the door if a trip presents itself. And I would, get out there is the main thing, and pick up the skills that you need and the experience to go lighter. If that's how you want to do it. I know people that just like to go out there and sit, and so you don't need to be very light for that. But if you like to do the miles, then pick up the skills to lighten your load.
Is there any part of you that craves the luxuries while backpacking? Because I feel like the older I get, the more I'm bringing the inflatable pillow and maybe like a little pint of whiskey. I mean, the whiskey's kind of always been with me, but like,
it's calories, so
that's true. It's true, and dense calories. Do you feel that pull whatsoever, or are you just so pure UL that you got blinders on?
Well, I think the spreadsheet's helpful for that, because it's like, I've been under 5 pounds base weight for so long. It's like, that's a barrier to me, it's like trying to, I could take an inflatable pad, but then I'd be over 5 pounds. I'm just not willing to go there. And I'm a little nervous. I sleep on a torso size 3/8" foam. And I'm a little nervous that, if I start taking an inflatable pad, I might like it. So it's just better not to.
Yeah.
As long as I can make do on the foam pad, that's what I know, and I still sleep, so that's good enough. I'm sure it'll change at some point, but.
Yeah. Well, spoken like a true engineer living off the spreadsheet. Well, Glenn, thank you so much for your time. I'm glad we were finally able to make this happen. Do you have is there like any links or accounts that you want people to go to, or is just Gossamer Gear good enough?
Gossamer Gear is good enough. I mean, you can poke around there. I think there's gear lists and stuff like that there. Some trip reports, things like that in our blogs. I will send you guys a copy of that sub 3 pound gear list, and also the lumbar pack trip spreadsheet.
Yeah.
So you can see that.
I'll have to fill Chance in on that story. But yeah, well, Glenn, again, thanks for your time. Very happy to make this happen. Thank you.
You bet. My pleasure.
Okay, I have to give him context now. I can't just let him think I'm crazy. The reason I was asking, so we have like a running joke on the podcast about this story because I'm like literally such an idiot. But when I was about to hike the PCT in 2017, I was responsible for the tent for me and my friend. And I was researching all these different tents because I wanted to have a very light pack, given that I'm only 5'1". And I was just like so zoned out, I would imagine, from like link to link, comparison, that for some reason I thought the one was a 2-person tent. And I also like have spent years working at summer camps, so I know how to set up like a tent in general. So I didn't take it out and set it up at all until night 1 on the PCT because I was like, it's a tent. How hard can it be? I saw the picture. I watched the video. I'm fine. And so I get in, my friend gets in, and she's just like sitting there staring at me. And she's like, I thought you were getting a 2-person tent. And I was like, yeah. This is it. This is our 2-person tent. And she's like, this is not a 2-person tent. And I was like, no, it's a 2-person tent. And she was like, what's it called? And I was like, the one. And she was like, the one? And I was like, well, yeah, like the one you need. And she just started screaming. She's like, this is not a 2-person tent. And I had been talking to one of the Gossamer Gear guys somewhere. It might have been Trail Days. I'm not sure where, but they had mentioned, maybe. They mentioned Japan though. And then you mentioned it and I was like, maybe I'm not crazy. But they're like, I don't know. In Japan, like a lot of people actually do buy it as a 2-person tent because they're so much smaller than we are. So they use it like that all the time over there. And I've always wondered if he was just saying that to make me feel better or if that was actually true.
That could be true for Japan. But in your defense, the reason that it's called the one is not because it's a 1-person tent.
So what is the origin of the name? Because since there's the two,
you push that record
when we first came out with it, it weighed 1 pound. So we called it the one because it was 1 pound.
Got it.
Wow.
Fun fact. Yeah. All right. Yeah. That's good. It's good to know the history of that. And I think that does clear your name a little bit. I mean, it still doesn't stand for the one you need.
I was really hoping you'd be like, oh my God, half of our sales.
You could spin it and say it's the 1 pound tent that you need.
Yeah, we'll just have them cut through all that audio and just replace it together.
There you go. Yeah. Well, Glenn, I know that you've got to bounce for dinner. Again, thanks for making some time for us tonight. Really nice to meet you. And
likewise.
Hopefully we can cross paths at like OR or one of those similar